Hello and welcome back to the show. Today's episode completely lit me up. I just finished recording, so I record these intros after the guests leave, and I still feel so enlightened. And you're going to find out why that is so important for me specifically during this episode. So I speak with Vaness Henry, who's a shamanic practitioner, producer, and author. She explores evolved body care by identifying afflictions in the body's energy field that may lead to illness or dis-ease or disease. And she's devoted much of her work to human design. So my most downloaded episode in 2023 was with Jasmine Nenna, and it was all about human design, specifically about digestion through the lens of human design. I was so excited to have Vaness on this season so that we could dive even deeper. But that being said, if you haven't listened to that episode with Jasmine or visited that newsletter, I highly recommend you check that out, and I will be sure to link to that. Today, Vaness talks about dynamic nourishment, which is how we nourish ourselves on every level in our lives. Because food is really just one aspect of our nourishment. If you think about it, we are fed by so much more than just food, from the content we ingest to the rituals we practice, to the things we wear and put on our skin, to the energies we take in, to our environments. Once we start to understand what nourishes us, it's almost like we gain a superpower. We begin to develop a deep trust in our own inner knowing, and we gain sovereignty over our lives. And it's fun too. This was such a great conversation. And you might want to pull up your human design chart if you don't know it. If you don't have it, you can use sources such as mybodygraph.com or the International Human Design School to pull up your chart. It might just be interesting to have on hand as you listen. As always, an easy way that you can support this work is by sharing the episode. If it resonates with you, share it with your friends and family, post about it on social media. It really helps things out. You can also rate the episode on your podcast app. You can leave a comment there, and you can sign up for the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter, where I send out weekly recipes. I dive deeper into these topics, and I explore what it means to feed ourselves with joy, with pleasure, and with freedom. All right, my friends, let's dive into the show. Hello, Vaness, and welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me.
It is such a joy to have you. I have loved your work. So I had worked with Jazz, who was on the show last year, and she actually gave us the link when you had your human design school as part of the offering of the course that she did. And I fell in love with your style because you are so clear. There's something about you, the way you teach, that is so crystal. So today I'm so excited to dive deeper with you a little bit into this idea of determination and digestion within human design. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you the first question that I ask all my guests, and that is, what is your cultural upbringing and how has that influenced your relationship to food?
Yeah, I love this question. I was doing some research and listening to how others answered this question on your show. And I thought it was a really good opportunity to point out that I didn't feel like I was raised with a huge amount of culture. My family is Français, we're French, and my dad's side is Austrian. But there's no real practices and lineages that were given to me from them. And when I was a kid, my dad passed away at 40. So I lost him when I was a child. And there was a food shift around that time. And we were a really meat-heavy family, like French families. It's like bread, cheese, meat, but everything's always in balance. Like you don't actually go into excess around these things. But, you know, I know my dad was definitely a meat eater and my mom was like, not as much meat, could easily have no meat. And that was like a big point between them, I remember. And my dad was really the one who ensured we ate dinner. And my mom, like you, is indirect, nocturnal. And she would sometimes be working at night. She had a lifestyle that was kind of set out at night. And then when my dad passed away, my mom was so broken from the experience and was working evenings and working actually a bunch of jobs that it suddenly became our own responsibility on how to feed and nourish ourselves. And my sister at that point was like a teenager and just kind of off doing her own thing. And there were times where I was very alone at home and it's time to feed yourself. And how do I do this? How do I go about doing this? And once I became married and had my own child, I married a Métis man and then gave birth to an Indigenous child. And there were cultural aspects within my husband's side of the family that allowed me to see through my upbringing, a lot of the aunties and uncles around me were Indigenous. However, my family line was not. I'm Caucasian, grandparents, both sides, like a long white line. However, the surrounding relatives were often Métis or Cree or Ojibwe. They were Indigenous. And I was not aware until I became older of the influence on nourishment that had in my young life, on the way the families gathered, the types of foods they made. But growing up, I was not aware that this was influencing my life. And as, you know, I kind of went into my own studies in the shamanic arts and learned about anthropology and cultural appropriation and then gave birth to this child, I had a real moment of needing to reevaluate my whiteness, my privilege, the way I understood even the influences of my childhood. And at that point, when I was going through all of that, was when I put on the most weight I had ever had. And only when I went through a real radical analysis of taking care of myself and reevaluating this was when I was able to reach new levels of health and wellness in my body. Something that I think is important to mention, though, in this story, shortly after my dad passed away, and I was left fending to myself in this sort of, you know, way, but I was quite independent. Like, I want to say that. I got diagnosed with my own cancer. My dad and I both had cancer, completely unrelated. And so my final year of high school, I was incredibly malnourished, very sick, on the deathbed, having chemo, having radiation. And that, for me, as an ego manifester in my human design, created a ton of anger that was basically just being held in the body. So when I became a full-grown adult, I really needed to start contending with some of these traumas and malnourishment that I had experienced in my life.
And I mean, I know this for myself, but that's directly related. Those traumas that we hold in our body, that energy that we hold in our body manifests itself physically.
Absolutely.
That sounds like then for you, you went through a shedding or some sort of release or some sort of clarification that allowed you to also come into harmony, more harmony with your body. I know we're kind of jumping in full speed, but I'm so curious as to what triggered that for you. What brought you that awareness, or did the two just kind of happen simultaneously without any kind of mental preparation? Were you just doing the emotional work and the physical stuff naturally came into balance?
Yeah, great question. After I was sick, I was really afraid in my own body. I had this massive tumor that had grown in my chest that I didn't know, couldn't see, was squashing all my really important organs. And I felt a sort of betrayal with my body. I felt like, how could this happen to me? My family's already been through this. This doesn't seem to make sense to me, which then kind of created this new pursuit and drive in me where I graduated on time, which I'm very proud of.
Wow.
And then I went right into college and I went to journalism, broadcast journalism, learning how do you tell your story? How do you actually investigate things? And then it kind of led me on this journey of having these kind of shamans come into my life and recognize the path that I was being called onto through my shocks with illness and some of the abilities that I was starting to develop. And being kind of guided by those people immediately after being sick. So, you know, you're 16, then you turn 17, and then there are these people around you. I had Reiki in the hospital. This was something that the hospital offered. Reiki is when someone puts their hands in your aura or on your body, and they're basically doing energy work. And this was offered in the hospital, and I had a pretty profound experience with it. It was like, what was that? You know, as soon as I was in remission, what was that? And so that was my starting point and where I started to first investigate. But then I was quickly scooped up by people who were like, you're not doing Reiki anymore. This is something else. Let us guide you here. And these were all indigenous teachers, or I want to say shamanic practitioners. They had all kinds of different modalities, but I was really guided with that. And then once I was kind of on that path and doing those deep studies to kind of facilitate my own healing, to understand shamanic illness, which shamanic illness is based on the energy fields. It's a very simple core principle. Your energy field either has something missing from it or something attached to it. And we will experience dis-ease or illness in the energy field of the body that will then eventually seep into the physical form if left ignored. Well, that theory and analysis led me into human design, was part of these things that I was seeking to study. Before that, I did a lot of work in Feng Shui and understanding how the environment affects the physical form, which is still where my primary focus is, because you cannot be well nourished if you're in an unhealthy environment. How well you are depends on the environment that you're in. And so for me, only once I had learned human design did I get curious more in a new way. But I was in my young 20s when I found it, and I wasn't really ready to experiment in the way that the culture of human design asks you to. However, once I gave birth to my son, I was going through my Saturn return. I was mid to late 20s. First of all, I was never meant to be a parent because I had radiation to my ovaries. So it was this big surprise. And then, this is a miracle. You should be grateful. And, there's all this expectation. And I can't be in this response position with this child all the time. And that's when I started to really experiment with my human design out of necessity, because I was getting really unwell. And now there was a little child. And I believe he's about the same age as your child. He's 8 now. He's going to be 9 soon.
Yeah, my youngest just turned 9.
Your youngest, yeah. And he was really raised with human design awareness, because human design is really for kids, in order for parents to, instead of putting their shit, hey, here's how I was raised, I'm going to raise you like that. Yeah. It doesn't acknowledge the individuality of the child. And then now with something like human design, it's for kids. We first have to teach the parents about themselves so that they can share it with their kids. And for me, that was really my big call to take the study seriously. I now had a child watching me. I was going to impact them. What do I need to know about my own health and wellness so I can raise a child in the way that they need to be raised? So the call really came only from becoming a parent.
I love looking at the history of this mosaic of who we are as people, because your story just is such a beautiful puzzle. And what I love about people and when people who are really following their soul's purpose is, I think every time I've talked to somebody who I really feel this from, it starts for, I don't want to say as selfish, but as an internal curiosity or an internal way of understanding themselves or an internal modality of healing. And it's almost like only through it when we can go through that stuff ourselves for ourselves, not being like, I'm going to go and be the next human design expert and be the star of the show. But gosh, it started so internally, then it's such an authentic and powerful way to bring knowledge forth because you've been through it. And so I just wanted to say that because I just find these journeys so beautiful.
I want to jump in actually with something that you said, because I could hear it on your voice. I'm very sound sensitive and noticed the tone that you dropped into. You felt like there's your sacral sound. You had to catch yourself by saying, it's not that it's selfish. Right there, you've identified the whole issue of our conditioning culturally, collectively, is we've been groomed to, it's noble to put others before you.
Yeah.
We inherently know that, no, you put your life vest on first, or you put the air, we know that. And yet we feel like it's selfish to take care of ourselves, to put ourselves first. So we design these lifestyles where we're taking care of absolutely everyone, not dealing with our own issues. And we become chronically unwell, sometimes terminally unwell. A lot of the work I do as a shamanic healer with human design and the body graph as my primary modality for understanding the energy field of the other is looking at their current conditions, chronic, any kind of symptoms that they have going on in their life, and understanding where it comes from. There are other tools that do this, like German New Medicine, Louise Hay's work. Both are controversial, both are gaining ground. It's a way of understanding the energy field of the body. You know, I loved in Jazz's interview a couple episodes ago about the itchy elbows and what that symptom of psoriasis is. I'd actually like to use you as an example. I can see that you are an indirect eater and you have touch cognition. Now, you have a rounded birth time. So I want to say to you, with a 3:45 birth time, I typically consider that to be high risk because there is a chance that somebody is giving you a rounded number. You might be born at 3:44. Or 3:47, but we're going to just culturally quickly grab, oh yeah, she was born at 3:45.
Sure.
And when we're looking at something this deep in the design, the cognition, we're looking at your senses. This is something way below your gaits, your lines, and even your colors, and we're getting into your tone. This is something very, very deep in your human design, and it will change minute to minute. So I can see that you are touch cognition, and I've done some checking, and it seems to stay that way for a bit. But as looking at somebody like that, you also have a secondary sense. You have a taste sense and your environment sense. So right away, when I'm looking at you, I'm looking at all the symptoms you could have as somebody with a sixth sense of touch and a second sense of taste. And so when you're as a mountains person, when you're in an aligned environment, your talents are going to come alive. Your podcast, I think, is a great example. Speaking, elevated, great sound, the types of conversations you have. Your abilities come alive. But when you are in a place that isn't resonant with you, it's as if your talents it's like feeling hard. It's not clicking. You could even go into a place and the conversation is flowing and you know that's for you. It's your signs that your body is resonating with what's going on. However, when things are ignored there, let's say you're in a workplace and it's toxic for you, it's not elevated, there's politics and it's really bringing you down. You might start to develop issues with that area, issues in your face, issues in your mouth, the organs there. Okay, you're exhaling.
Can I,
for you.
I want to get so literal with this because I literally have an example. So my office used to be in the living room of my house, adjacent to my kitchen. We have an open floor plan. I was facing a wall without a window and I had no sense of barrier or vision. And it was necessary. We didn't have another office space in the house. We built my little office up here in our attic where I'm overlooking, and we live on a mountain road. I'm overlooking the mountain. This podcast, I'm not kidding you. I launched my newsletter. I had stopped what I was doing. I was in such a rut. My body gave out on me. I was so unhappy. I was a food blogger. I gave it up without knowing what was coming next. We built this office. I got perspective and it flowed within 2 months. And this podcast just literally just happened without any effort.
Easy, right?
But I have said this to my husband a million times. None of this would have happened without that office. I feel it in my body.
And so what's actually going on there? Once your body is held and oriented in a way where its natural level of activity is going to come alive for you, what you emit from that space feels so good for the people it's for. So it was a very high compliment for me when you said, I love the way you share your material because it's very clear. What you're saying to me is when you put that out, you're in a great aligned space, Vaness. So I'm quite strict. If I'm not feeling great, I'll cancel. I'll stop the thing. I don't do too many live things because I don't know necessarily how I'm going to feel and I would hate to disappoint. And if I know I have the potential of feeling really shitty and then going and emitting that to someone, well, I think there's a certain level of responsibility there that I need to take responsibility for how I'm feeling. I don't feel good. It's not my fault. It's just something has happened in my system. And I don't want to be emitting that to everybody that I engage with. So when I look at your example of something that seems simple, although like an undertaking, like you to create this new space to go exist in, it just put your body in the space that allowed you to regain perspective so you could think clearly and then are able to make decisions more clearly and navigate more clearly. But I want to yoink you in another direction because that is your external sense. That's something that might flare up from time to time. Have you ever had, or are you somebody who's ever had issues with your skin or sore muscles or joints or like put your back out? That's something that we see a lot. Joints for you. That's something I see a lot with touch cognition. My mom is touch cognition. After my dad died, the whole body went arthritis. Yeah. She was like stuck in a position. And my husband too is touch cognition. That gal put his back out, like a little bit of stress. His hips are out, something's out. And so that calibration of the body, when those things happen, it's just a sign of I need to nourish myself more. My body is giving me my unique signs and symptoms because I have a natural sense in me that has supernatural abilities when I nourish it properly. We are so evolved now, and yet we're just beginning to tap into, like, why can some of us read a room? Why can some of us pick up on the energy of other people? Why do some of us have these keen ass instincts? Well, what would happen to all those senses if we nourished them in a really high quality way? And that's what we're looking at when we're looking at some of the nourishment stuff in human design when it comes to taking care of our bodies. But senses and our supernatural abilities, if we know how to properly take care of them, are something we all are calibrated to. We all have our own unique sense. For example, I said you were touch. I'm taste. You have an external sense of taste. I have an external sense of touch. We're little flips, we're little opposites around here. But for me, when I go in the right space, I will be able to, with a sense of touch in the right environment, we'll be able to leave you with something. Wow, I really took something away from that conversation I had with her. She really passed on an energy or an emotion to me. Also, just really simply, I could go into a place and it has all the nice finishing touches I like. I'm like, ooh, this is a place for me. I love the gold hardware. I love the color on the wall. It's a sign my body likes where it is.
Okay. So can you clarify? I don't know the difference between, you said external, the external
Absolutely.
and the internal. So what does that mean? And what are the different ones?
So we actually have a collaboration of 4 senses. When we're looking deep in the body graph, we're looking at something called the variable in the body graph, and that's where I specialize. This is really measuring the change in the body graph, the little ways that, you could be a pure manifesting generator 4/6 profile and standing next to another person just like that. And yet when we go look at your depths, we see how different you are. And that's why your precise birth time really matters. So when we're looking at the way you are designed to feed yourself, you are going to have a sense deep inside your body that you're feeding into, an internal sense. But as you're navigating the playing field of life, you have another sense that will flare up from time to time to help you navigate. So one is really this external sense in your body to help you move about the playing field safely. And another sense deep inside your body, an internal sense that you're feeding into, is connected to your authority. So when you are really feeding into your touch sense, your touch cognition, it's going to give you a more pronounced sacral authority, a bigger
right.
I love
me.
we
You
did it
hear
at
it.
the same
You
time.
know this.
Yeah. And so when you're able to connect with that, you're able to make more informed decisions. Human design, when you get into it, is really simply learning about how to make an informed decision for yourself. And as you keep going in that study and you experiment using your authority, your life's going to start to change. People around you is going to start to change. Your body might start to change because with every aligned decision you're making, using those deep senses in your body, you are going to naturally be aligning to environments that you resonate with. And at that point in your studies, if you look around and life has started to look really different, it's probably time to scratch beneath the surface and look at your variable. So not only, you don't know only how to make a decision, but you can become more aware. And when you start to really fine tune, this is how I need to feed myself and what dynamic nourishment means. And I know you're interested in talking about that. And here are the environments that I resonate with. I don't resonate with these kinds of people and shit, they're in my family. So I got to deal with that, Yeah. And then also we have senses on our personality side. Our consciousness has an internal sense and an external sense as well. So we are really this mix of these deep senses that have these natural abilities, but if we know how to take care of them, they can be supernatural abilities.
So, okay, I had talked with Jazz about determination or digestion. I will link to that for you listeners. We went through kind of very briefly the 6 different kinds. Let's start here. In your words, what is that? And how does that influence how we nourish ourselves?
Absolutely. So that the podcast conversation that you did with Jasmine Nana would be really great to listen to if you're intrigued by this conversation. Jazz is a really dear friend of mine and highly intelligent individual. And she laid it out really well in that. Because the human design study comes with a lot of language. I really view it as a language study.
Yeah.
And you have to start to begin to understand all these terms, which can be clunky at first. And when we're finally scratching beneath the surface to look at the way we're designed to feed ourselves, there are 6 ways, 6 colors that we could be fed through. And those colors are appetite, which is a first color, taste, which is a second color, thirst, which is a third color, touch, which is a fourth color, sound, which is a fifth color, and light, which you are, Nikki, which is the sixth color. Now, when we're talking about feeding the body, we have to appreciate how evolved we are now. I really want to hammer that home. Like you have the potential for supernatural abilities. You have evolved nourishment practices that you need. It's not enough to just stuff our faces with broccoli if we're in a toxic relationship. So the rituals and practices you're ingesting in life matter. The clothes that you wear, you're ingesting matters. The skin, what you put on your skin, the products in your hair, you're ingesting that. A really helpful way to understand this is we consume content. Think of all the content you're consuming. And as humanity becomes more aware, we usually lean on the most prevalent technology to understand ourselves. So for example, when human design came out, 80s, what was really going on was thinking of ourselves like vehicles, the assembly line, cars, that was really going through a big shift. Now you'll notice our technology is more about video games. You're a player, you're a main character. And that's the way we're kind of understanding ourselves. So when you're thinking about the way that your character, your player, your person that you are needs to experience nourishment, you can look at it through the lens of whatever style is that you're designed to feed yourself, which Nikki, you're light. So we're going to use that example. When it comes to putting actual food in your mouth, a light eater needs to pay attention to the time of day that they're hungry at. This could be somebody who's hungry right in the morning, but as you've shared, sometimes you feel sick in the morning. Like, I don't want to eat that. You might even be someone who prefers to sleep in, but your lifestyle has maybe forced you got to wake up early. Maybe you actually like being up at night. Maybe you love being up in the morning. So the first part of experimenting with a light color is, well, when do I like to ingest? We don't need to know if you're direct or indirect yet, because again, you might have the wrong minute and that could change. So I like to translate these in a non-binary way and place emphasis on the color and how to experiment with it. So somebody like you who's a light color, your lifestyle, you got to really pay attention to, is it a nighttime lifestyle or a daytime lifestyle? So because we know you're indirect, you might really want to do your movement practice in the evening instead of the morning. You might find that you like to interview people at certain times of the day. Maybe it can't be too early. Maybe you like to do it later. You want to just become aware of this. When am I consuming a lot of content? Is it before bed when I'm scrolling, or do I start my day that way? A big piece for light eaters is they need to be consuming things that illuminate them, that inspire them. So think of the types of conversation and focus you have on your podcast. It's elevated. There is something about it that illuminates you. So often with people who are light eaters, we do see some kind of threading through their life of spirituality or religion in some way because they need that feeds them. Like if they don't have that, they become malnourished. I've seen a lot of direct eaters who are like devout Christians. I've seen a lot of indirect eaters who, they are psychic and they work with people going through really deep traumas, right? This is about light. So what's been hiding in the dark? And they might want to go into that.
Yeah.
So you see, this is not just about eating at night or eating in the daytime. It's about so much more. And so when we talk about dynamic nourishment and we're looking at the colors that we can be arranged and designed with deep in our body graph, suddenly we can become very unique. I'd like to give one more example just to kind of hammer that home. I'm a sound person. So the fifth color I mentioned with sound. And this means I'm very sensitive to the volumes and amounts of things I take in. Am I full or am I empty? So we can see a lot of overeating, undereating here. These are people who can put on weight because they're overdoing certain things, or they can go underweight because they're not doing certain things that they need. And they can get very dysregulated by certain sounds. But sometimes you might hear things in this part of the study like, oh, eat with music on.
Yeah.
I actually think that's a very primitive translation. What we really want you to be paying attention to is volume, not as in loudness, but as in amounts. Are you aware of when you're actually full, when you've actually had enough of that person? Are you aware of when, I can't watch any more of this? It's like making me feel fried. And just if you're able to increase your awareness of those things, you're deeply experimenting with the way you are meant to experience nourishment. It's not so much about the ingredients we put into our mouth all the time, but the ingredients of life that we're ingesting to build a lifestyle for ourselves. It's about the rituals we do each day, the practices we do, who we engage with, what we wear. It's the entire lifestyle. You're meant to consume things a certain way.
And that's so fascinating because we don't think about that. Nobody talks about that within this Western culture of, we talk about diet and nutrition and nourishment. And certainly within my work, I talk a lot about ritual because, as you said, I'm an indirect light eater and I'm fascinated by my spirituality. However, I define that for myself is what fuels me as a human.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like for your design in particular, looking at it, if you were to lose touch, some key language from you because you're a touch cognition, if you were to lose touch with that, you would start to wilt like a flower. You would start to deplete. You wouldn't have the energy levels that you're meant to have. When you are able to contemplate the universe for a way that works for you, you get something out of that. You're fed by that. So it goes to say, if that was removed and missing from your energy field, something's missing, you can develop certain illnesses.
Yeah,
right. And you wouldn't think that, I don't have anything to believe in. That's not going to connect.
That's what's like a light bulb moment right now, because it's like, then physically I might be like, I need to eat all the kale in the world because I feel so depleted. Wherein, it's not necessarily. The food plays a part, but it's everything. It's the entire lifestyle. And as you said, like it's even the clothes that you choose to wear. Like what? And yet it makes sense.
Let's talk about eating kale till you're blue in the face. How frustrating and discouraging if you're doing all this work, busting your ass trying to put these quote unquote healthy foods in your body, and then you discover that your particular body can't even handle kale. Actually, doesn't like kale. You know what I mean? Like you got the shits, you got the runs. It's like, but I'm doing everything right. Well,
so true.
So, I have a son who is a touch color. So the energy around him when he eats is very important. And if he's eating something, it could be something he loves to eat. And then all of a sudden he's in the bathroom and he gets the runs after. Well, I know that's nothing wrong with the food. Well, what was going on around him when he ate? Was he very distracted? Was he feeling some kind of way? Was he getting yelled at? We wouldn't yell at him, but you know what I mean? Like, and then you're taking in that food when you're feeling that way. Well, your body is upset. So what do you think is going to happen from ingestion to digestion? How's it going to come out? And so that's not necessarily the case for me, but his body is like that. So how valuable for me as a parent to know the environment when he's nourishing himself really needs to be in a certain energy. We need to create a mood. Otherwise, his stomach, his body is going to get upset.
That was such groundbreaking knowledge for me. Like you said, when you have kids, because I'm the only person in my family. I have my oldest is, what is the first? Appetite? Is that the?
Yes. So very sensitive diet. That's somebody who cannot have a lot of change all at once. They need really simple things.
Yes.
Perfect.
Transformation. We take her to a craniosacral therapist, but it's anytime there's transformation, whether that's going to a new school year, whether it's even a birthday.
It's going to be challenging, hey?
It is very hard for her. And my other daughter is a taste, and so is my husband. So knowing this
picky,
about them,
selective.
And this is, and it was like the biggest eye opener because, with my youngest, she does not like foods touching. She's a great eater, but she's very specific about how she ingests food and when. And it's so
sorry, which child is that?
That is the 9-year-old.
And she has what kind of diet?
Closed taste.
Okay.
She actually loves like bowls of blueberries, bowls of apples. She wants rice and she wants beans, not necessarily mixed together. She wants, she's very simple, but she'll eat all the things just in her own unique way. Whereas me, I'm going to put everything in the same bowl. I want maximum flavor, maximum texture. I want the beauty of it, and it's like, I don't need to force that on her. And that is like, how you started this conversation with your own son. I'm a trained chef. Of course, I want to force that on my family. I want to be like, no, I just composed this gorgeous dish that took me all this time to make.
Hello.
And you realize, ego,
Yeah.
my way of doing things has nothing to do with what is correct and feels good in their body.
This is what I personally find so exciting about the study of human design, because you don't need to put your things on your kids, because you're exactly right. I made this beautiful dinner. Look at these gorgeous colors in this thing that I made. You're going to love it. And they don't. And it's like, I'm so disappointed. Like I put all this energy in it. But as soon as you know the way your child consumes, it's exciting to watch it come out in them. You're no longer trying to put the way you eat onto them or the way you digest life onto them. Instead, you're watching for their depths to reveal themselves so you can then encourage that in them. So suddenly you're not so frustrated when that picky eater is like, I love the dish you made, Mom, but I actually have to take those couple ingredients out.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you will love them. It's like, actually, now I know for their system, it might be harmful. So I want to always encourage in my kid to listen to their body.
Yes. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. So we've touched a little bit upon this idea of dynamic nourishment. And can you get into that a little bit more? When we were emailing back and forth, that's the first time I really heard that term. And so I just kind of want to just understand a little bit more about what that means in your opinion.
So when I'm speaking about dynamic nourishment, I'm trying to do a lot of education around you're consuming formless things. You consume so much more than just what you put in your mouth. And that's why I think consuming content is really great language for us to understand with how evolved we are now. And when we think about dynamic nourishment, we really want to start to look at our whole life to consider all the things I'm ingesting in my life. For example, I'm ingesting this experience with you. I now know it's a shore for me because I'm coming over there into your world. It's a mountain for you. It's this nice elevated environment. Okay, our bodies are kind of set up. So we know that's really great. And then when I think about that, I'm getting something out of this. Is it feeding me? Well, how long is the interview? How much before I'm full? Can I do an hour? Can I do 2 hours? So those are things I would need to think about, but not necessarily you if you're not sensitive to that. So as soon as we start to understand what we're sensitive to, I'm now going to take that information. Okay, how much of this hangout with this person before I've had enough? It's like, okay, I need to get away from them. I've had enough. How much of this movement practice before I'm now tired? Do I actually have to do this whole hour-long thing, or is that too much for me? How long do I need to be sitting at my desk and doing my work? So it starts to actually influence the entire arrangement of your life. And if you're thinking about life as this constant consumption of reality, well, what do I need to be aware of when it comes to the way I consume things? Do I need things really simple and one thing at a time and pure and wholesome, like your daughter, the appetite eater? Do I need to be really selective and let things go each season and be changing from season to season as a taste person so I can stay fresh? A little anecdote I want to say about that because you have two people in your family. It's very important for people who are taste color, so who are an open or closed taste dietary regimen, that they are not consuming something that has gone stale. So think about somebody who is taste and is in a relationship and it's fallen flat, it's gone stale. And they still stay in that relationship. They're still consuming all that energy. Yeah, you're going to become unwell. Think about you stay at a job and it's expired. I don't like it here anymore. I don't want to be, but you stay for whatever reason. You're going to start to become unwell. So taste is particularly sensitive about the freshness. So think about how that would go through the whole life. These are kids who do something for a season. They're in piano and you want to enroll them in again. And they're like, I don't want to do piano. Like, but we've invested in it all this time. Well, I don't want to do it. What's great about those people is let them let it go, because what we know is the season always comes back around. And so they will want to revisit it if it's something they select in the future. So it's okay to let people go when it feels like it's gone stale, because you trust that when things align, you might reconnect again as the season comes again, right? The seasons always return. So it's not this fear of like, no, I'm going to let it go. Like if the food isn't growing in your environment, it's not time to eat it for you. It's not fresh. It's been sent from somewhere else. So these are
Yeah.
people who may really like to garden or like to have food seasonal intake.
Yeah, that's totally, so much of this is so true. My husband is the gardener. That is his joy. But it's so interesting just to pop in, because I think this will resonate with some of our listeners, is my daughter is in piano lessons. And thankfully, we have an amazing music teacher, and his whole platform is about developing the love of music. And so they can switch. And he's always like, let them try new instruments. And it fits her so well, because definitely within me, if it had been a normal piano teacher, it wouldn't have worked. And within me, there's still that sense of like, but you need to stick with the piano. You're doing the piano. Aren't you doing the piano? And now that you're telling me this, I'm like, oh, this makes so much sense. And that's why she loves it. She's got freedom there.
What's her environment?
Oh, let me see. Actually, I have it pulled up.
That's my favorite area. And that's where I get everyone to look there.
And it's interesting because her and my husband both are kitchens. She's dry and then he is wet. So they're interesting. They both have the same determination, taste, but they're both opposite sides of the spectrum.
So one of them is more set at ease in the environment, and one of them, they get a little bit more excited. Their energy comes alive in the environment. I love that setup where the piano lessons are and the love of music, kitchens. Let's make a mess. Let's get into anything. Let's see where it goes. Like, what a great environment for her. I just want to echo that to you. So, but also with your mountains perspective, you're a mountains person and you're just like, no, we needed something else. I wanted something else. I wanted to be in piano, but look at this. Oh, they're doing it differently. It illuminates you just a little bit of a different way.
Yeah.
Let's keep proceeding through the colors and the diet, because we've gone a little bit on appetite and taste. And let's just talk about thirst for a little bit for the topic of dynamic nourishment. Thirst people have very kind of systems that need balance. These are people who can get really hot and really cold. They can have sweating issues, like their body can they can get the chills, or they can, and that's a sign that the body is a little bit out of whack. And these are people who have a thirst for something. So they might have a diet that has more liquids, or they might like their ingredients mixed together a certain way or blended, or the way it's arranged they might be picky about or have some feelings about. When you zoom out now and look at dynamic nourishment, you look at the entire life, they have a thirst for knowledge. Like, these are people who are going to get into certain things and they need to quench that thirst. Do you see how that language just they need to quench that thirst, but also they may need to adjust the balance of things here and there, because they can get very dysregulated. If their hydration levels are out of whack, if they're not staying hydrated, if they're not keeping a balanced lifestyle, whatever that means for them, if they are not finding balance in their movement practice, if they're not finding balance in their spiritual practice, they can get really out of whack, and their systems can get, these are people who can get really dysregulated. It's mutative in this way. And so when you're thirst, you're thinking about, well, how would I put this together? How would I arrange this? How would I assemble my day? What are the pieces I want to put into my day? How do I want to arrange it? It's all about the arrangement of life, the arrangement of the nourishment. They might be very attracted to bright colors and plating and these beautiful smoothie bowls that have been all blended together. Or, I know so many thirst people who are like in relationship with their Vitamix, like they're like, they love a dip. They love to make a fancy dip. And so this can shake out to being people who are hot or cold thirst. And there can be a lot of emphasis on consuming warm or cool things. But before we even get to that, I just like to emphasize the thirst color, not emphasize the binaries, and just look at the arrangement of life, the mixture of life. Though you need things liquefied for you, broken down so you can understand them. It needs to all be disseminated in a certain way. So how would that affect my movement practice? How would that affect the way I do my work? How is this going to affect my, oh my gosh, like talking about taste colors and thirst color with fashion. Those are people who need to be in season. They need to be trendy. But an appetite color person might buy a wardrobe full of basics, or they like one shirt, they're buying it in 12 colors. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it affects all areas of life. Let's go into touch, which we have talked a little bit about. I have a child who's touch. These are people who are sensitive to the energy around them. So if you're all of a sudden going in a movement practice and the culture of that movement practice is like people are shitty there or stealing your spot or whatever, it's not going to have the right energy for you to even participate in that experience. Or let's say you go with a buddy every Wednesday, you go to your yoga class together. And then your buddy's always like nagging you or like negative. That's going to affect your whole experience with the movement practice. So what's around you and the energies around you is really going to matter. If you're a touch person, does it have the right touch for me? But what I notice a lot with these people after they ingest something, content, music, movies, food, you'll know if it was for them or not based on how the bowel movement is after. Do you have an upset stomach? Well, what did you eat? It's not so much about what you eat, but what was going on around you when you were doing that thing. They can get, it's like the body can be very sensitive in that way. Some people need things really calm. Some people need it bopping, energy around them. My son is like that. He will come home, he'll put some music on, he'll put a show on, and he's coloring. But it's just created the energy in the room for him to color, you know? So funny.
Yeah.
And let's just pop quickly into the final two, which we've briefly touched on, sound and light. Sound, of course, the volumes of things, the amounts of things, how much before I'm full, how much of this movement practice, how much of this hangout. Do I need to come at things in a high volume? I need a lot of it, or a low volume. I don't need that much of it. And am I aware of that in my life? And with light, of course, there is this component of the daytime and the nighttime and the timing of when I want to do things or experience things or consume things. But the emphasis I like to put there is around more of the belief system and what you choose to imagine, take in, what inspires you, what motivates you, what are you hungry for? And typically these are people who will do like pole dancing, getting in touch with the dark side of my body and owning it. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like things like that we can see. Or these are people who have like enriching meditation practices because it illuminates the mind. So there is this spirituality or religion or something with the belief system that we see there that is really vital for feeding you.
Wow. So I think that everyone listening is just like, gosh, here we thought it was just food, and it is not food. What nourishes us is our entire lifestyle.
Absolutely.
And so the invitation is to start to pay attention, I think it's very helpful to get to know your type, and I will, Vaness, link to your website. In fact, can you tell people where they can find you? I know that you do one-on-one sessions and all that good stuff.
You can find me at vanesshenry.com. I'm always selling trainings to learn this. I do offer private mentorship or even just analysis if you want me to look at your depths. But I also do a lot of kind of playful material. I have a show called On the Roof on YouTube that I do with my husband where we just live our life and we point out the human design as it's kind of happening through our stories just so that there's some comedy. And it's not so serious and you can learn through play. I think that's the best way to learn is to make it fun. And when you're experimenting with things like your depths and your design, it makes life more fun. Yes. Okay, well, if I know I'm an appetite person, how do I look at that through multiple layers of my life? My food, but also when I work with people with this area intimately, and I'm helping people integrate their variable or get in touch with their depths or reach these new tiers of health, or, you know, even dare I say, cure some illnesses that people experience. It is discouraging when you get to food and you make it all about the food without realizing for us, food is so much more than broccoli. We're fed by so much more. So once you place this emphasis on these other areas of life, I find people are more encouraged. I find they have better integration of their depths and they get more out of the study.
I love
so
that.
If that is something that you are, interested in learning more about, there's amazing people online who talk about this, but the International Human Design School and Jovian Archive are places that you can go to get this information. If you are drawn to people who have embodied it and are implementing it, that's more along the lines of work that I do, go on Instagram and just find these people. They're all in community with each other too and talking about their experience. And you can find people who have the same arrangements as you and learn what's working for them. And it can be really expansive.
Well, I just want to leave people with that notion of experimenting and making it fun and playful because it is fun. Like when I found out I was an indirect light eater, I was like, oh, let me try to
what does this mean for me?
What does this mean for me? And it becomes fun. And then you start to know, okay, this works and this doesn't work. And now I have sovereignty. Now I have ownership over my own self.
You become
brilliant.
way more empowered, and I think braver and bolder to stop people pleasing and recognizing, you know what? I know that's not good for me. Wow, I would normally agree to this, but I can feel in my body it's not for me. I'm getting all my senses, all my signs are flaring up, and I'm in deep relationship with this body. My consciousness is really the caretaker to the body, paying attention to the body. I want to live as long, healthy life as possible. What do I need to know about this body? And that starts to get really fun. And as you're getting more in touch with that and you're getting braver in saying no and not saying yes to absolutely everything, you are going to reach new aspects of health.
Thank you so much. This has been such an inspiring and enlightening conversation. It certainly lit me up. All of the ways that I love to get lit up.
Actually, Nikki, that's a great way to just by using that language, that's an amazing way to get more in touch with this part of yourself. Oh, I'm so lit up from that. Listen for when you're saying that, because it's like, yes, this
such
is
an easy
for
tip.
me.
What lights me up?
This is a language study.
Oh, yeah. And it makes a difference. Language influences everything.
Totally.
I do have one more question for you.
Sure.
It's a fun one. It's your last meal on earth. What would it be?
Okay. I love hearty food. I'm an ego manifester. It would be shepherd's pie, the layer of ground beef, layer of corn, tomato soup, mushroom soup, and then mashed potatoes on top with cheese. And my mom would be the one to make it.
Yes.
Because she'd put her energy in it with her touch cognition, and I would devour it. And you know what? My kid hates that recipe. And as I say it, it sounds disgusting, but I'm like, oh, it's so good. Somebody sensitive to volume, I could eat that until the cows come home. Let me tell you.
Oh my gosh. To me, it sounds amazing. And that's literally like exactly what my mom used to make too. So
comfort food.
I feel you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, Nikki.
Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month, you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.